Okay, let's bring this up. So it's the Toyota War. I'm listening to this as an audiobook. It's just amazing to listen to the this because they keep like saying Chad, they keep saying GUNT out loud. And every time I hear like there's one part where it says crushed under the weight of the gut. I don't know, it's amazing. It's just fucking incredible. Um it's Kino. It might be the most Kino thing in history. Okay, so for those of you who don't know what the Gunt is, so there is a picture. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, you guys might want to evade your eyes because this is kind of disgusting. Okay, so I'm sure most of you probably know who Ethan Ralph is, but this picture surfaced after Knoxville of his stomach leaking out there, and from that we got the term Gunt, which is a cross between cunt and gut, and that became his nickname, and his persona is Ethan Ralph the Gunt. So just let's put that into context. Okay. So Libya had this irredentist claim to northern Chad called the Azu Strip. Now, from my understanding, the Azu Strip was part of Ethiopian. I think Ethan Ralph is like 400. He's like 300 something pounds at 5'1". He weighs, I think, like 100 pounds more than I do, and he's a full foot shorter. So, yeah. So yeah, so this was part of Italian Libya, but it wasn't part of Libya upon it being released at the end of World War II. Um, and apparently it was rich in uranium, but Gaddafi, the supervillain that he was like, I'm going to take this over because I'm going to show Chad that I'm a Chad. Was basically his like thing, and he also wanted to intervene in it because he wanted to impose a Libyan friendly regime in Chad. Um, so let's just go up and take a look at the forces. So I'm not gonna. There is like a number of different. Maybe we'll just read through this because this whole thing was just really like confusing because it went on and on and on and on for like over a decade. Let's see, or for a decade. Okay, so let's go down here. So Libyans occupied the strip during the Chad Civil War. So that was when we had. Is this when we had FAP, or is this before? Okay, so there was FAN. Yes, FAP. Okay. The People's Armed Forces. So we have a portion of this called FAP. We have the Vulcan Army. Um, Literally the Vulcan Army. I'm just going to pretend it's a Star Trek reference, um, or a reference to the god Vulcan. So we have FAP, we have the Vulcan Army, we have the Gunt, and we have Chats. And just Gaddafi, because Gaddafi's like a supervillain. Gaddafi had like his all-female virgin bodyguard and shit like that. So, okay, so let's see here. So I believe the Christian government got overthrown by the uh, Islamic government, by an Islamic group. Let's see here. Um, So he decided to back the Islam. I think they were the Islamic Legion, was what they were called. So he decided to back the Islamic Legion, which were like Arab. Um, Let me just look this up. Okay, yeah, we'll just take a slight break. Um, yeah, Gaddafi invited Italian models to his palace and gave them copies of the Quran. When he went to France, he on a state visit, he insisted on staying in a tent. So yeah, so he had an all-female cadre of bodyguards. Um, because he believed Arab gunmen would have trouble firing at women. Uh, would keep. I think they had to be virgins. No, maybe that's somewhere else that it did. So yeah, he had his Amazonian bodyguards. When did they did? I'm trying to see if they. Yeah, so that was just some of the supervillain like uh, shit um, that he was involved with. Gaddafi is just like it's just fucking amazing. Okay, so where were we again? Where were we again? So the Chad Civil War. So I don't even really know how to explain how the Chad Civil War went because basically there was a bunch of different sides in it that kept switching sides, and Libya kept changing who they were backing. Like initially, the GUNT was the anti-Libyan force, but then it became the pro-Libyan force, and then it became anti-Libyan again. And it was just such a fucking like. Let me even see here. Where does it say GUNT? Yeah, like you can see here. So the anti-Libyan, so GUNT was initially anti-Libyan, but then it became pro-Libyan, and then it became anti-Libyan again. Um, I don't know. The PLO was randomly involved in this for some reason. Um, Israel was randomly involved with this. So yeah, some of them just kind of switched sides. There was the Islamic Legion. Um, was part of Gaddafi's plan of creating the Great Islamic State of the Sahel. What the fuck? I hadn't even seen this. Let me look at what this meme was. No, that's part of ISIS. Um, I can't even find it. Um, yeah, because Gaddafi was both a Pan Africanist and an and a Pan Arabist. It's really weird. I'm trying to find if there's like it lists anywhere where it references his like dream of creating the. I don't know. It's fucking just bizarre. Um, yeah, the creation of a client state. Um, okay, so he like okay. Just sorry, I'm just trying to like even figure this shit out. Okay, so the one thing I will say in the Libyan army's defense over the course of this war is the French were really tribalish in the way that they dealt with it. So the French intervened on the side of the Sorry, not the side of the Israelis, the side of the Chads, and the French sent in fighter bombers, and the Libyans were scared to shoot them down because that would trigger a war with France. So France was literally, it was a cries out in pain as he strikes you situation. So France would just blow up Libyan shit, and the Libyans couldn't fire back because they were afraid that if they shot down a French plane, then France would intervene more because it would be interpreted as an aggressive action. And that was kind of one of this thing happened. Another kind of issue that was that during this war, Gaddafi survived. I think it was like 4 or 5 different military coups. So you had the situation where divisions no longer existed within the Libyan army. It was just battalions, and that obviously didn't really work. I don't know. So let's see here. Let me just see. So there's a couple different phases of the war. Um, Basically, Libya won a couple times during the early war because the people they were fighting against literally had no anti-tank weapons. So even though the Libyans were completely retarded, the fact that they had tanks and the Chads didn't have any anti-tank weapons meant there really wasn't anything that they could do um, at the time. So let's see here. Um, but I forget. Let me just see if they have like a list because I can't really keep the whole thing straight because the whole thing is just it took like it just went on forever and the whole thing was just such a fucking mess. Okay, so um that was this one. So let's see here. Libyan victory. I think this was when Libya was fighting the Chads, and let's see here. So this was helping. Um, I'm sorry. This is fucking great content. But yeah, generally speaking, the Libyan forces were just extremely passive. Like, they wouldn't counterattack. They wouldn't even normally shoot when fired upon. Their aircraft couldn't hit anything. Their artillery couldn't hit anything. It was just a complete and utter fucking disaster. Um, One of the things that the Libyans did. So I think by this point in the war in the mid 80s, the Libyans had managed to hold the northern half of the country, and the current government held the south. So this is what the GUNT was holding at this point in time, because the GUNT I think was temporarily the national government, but then it got overthrown by FAN and FAP, and then FAN and FAP kicked the Libyan kicked the GUNT out, and then the GUNT allied with the Libyans, and they controlled like the northern half of Chad. So the French were offered ordered I think offered like a mutual withdrawal of their forces from Chad if the Libyans would do the same, and Libya agreed to it and then just didn't withdraw their forces. Um, and used that as an opportunity to try to fire, excuse me, to do their own counteroffensive. Let's see here. Yeah, so okay, let's see here. The following year, the French withdrawal was one of the quietest since the ascent of power of Habre with both forces, even if the GUNT had initially expressed desire. Let's see here. The GUNT was increasingly isolated internationally and disintegrating internally in reaction to the decline of his client. Okay, so then there was FANT and FAP. Okay. So we had a couple different things. I think this was. Let's see here. There was the Tibesti War, which the Libyans got their asses kicked. Anyways, let's get to the fucking Toyota War. Um, let's get to the Toyota War. So this was the final phase of the Libyan Chad War. So after okay, so sorry, just go back. I'm sorry if this is fucking confusing. This is great content. So the French and Libyans had made the agreement to withdraw from Chad at the same time, and Libya signed it but then didn't withdraw, and that really pissed France off. So France went Habre and the Chads, and they're like, "Look, Chads, what do you need to win this war? We'll give you tanks, we'll give you artillery, we'll give you aircraft. Just name what you need." And Habre was like, "Look, dudes, we don't have the like IQ or the capacity to use tanks or to use any of this shit. Just give us machine guns, anti-armor rifles, and just give us some fucking Toyotas with crew-served weapons on the back." And they were just like, "Are you sure you don't want tanks and aircraft? It's like you're going to be disadvantaged against the Libyans." He's just like, "Look, dude, we don't have the IQ to use these things. We're just going to do what we know how to do, which is just to do desert warfare the way our ancestors did. But we're going to do it with with fucking pickup trucks and recoilless rifles." Um, and they're like, "We're such chads that we don't need." Let me just see here. We don't need like tanks or aircraft or any of that shit. We just need Toyota pickup trucks with guns on them. So here's some images from the Toyota War. So we have the I'm not sure if that's an AA gun. We have a heavy machine gun. We have rocket launchers on the back. We have the Toyotas with the recoilless rifles. Um, we have a bunch of Chads riding on that. Uh, I think they also got some armored cars. We have yeah, there we go, a recoilless rifle on the back of the. Yeah, Toyota trucks are really resistant to damage. So, so what wound up happening is the Chads just went Chad on them, and the Chads just used the Chads just used traditional African tactics. So the Libyans refused to do reconnaissance. So the Libyans had like drones. I think they might have had drones, but they had aircraft and all this mechanized warfare. But the commanders were lazy, so they refused to do recon. The Chads actually did stuff like recon. They like would probe the Libyan lines to figure out where the Libyan lines were weak and then attack there. They would also use swarm tactics where they would attack from multiple directions at the same time. And some of the battles you had near the end of the war where it would literally be the Libyans would lose 10 times the number as the Chads would. And there was battles where they'd lose like 3 Toyotas versus like 70 or 80 tanks for the Libyans because the Libyans were just incapable of using any of their shit. They couldn't use their aircraft, they couldn't use their artillery. The Chads didn't even have artillery. They had like mortars and shit like that. Um, Also, the main thing France did after that was France provided maintenance because the Chads weren't able to maintain like their trucks. Um, that was beyond their capability. It was too hard. Let's just take a look at a couple of these. They also had like strategic things, like where um, they would go past Libyan fortified positions and cut off their supply route. And the Libyans didn't really know how to deal with that. There was like a case where the Chads attacked at night. Even though the Libyans had gotten night training from the Soviet Union, they just kind of ran around and fired in random directions and got their asses kicked. Let's see here. Battle of Fadwa. Okay, so like here's an example. This is probably the best example. Battle of Fadwa. Okay, so we had 1,200 Libyans versus 3,000 Chads, and the Chads lost 18 people died, 3 trucks were destroyed. The Libyans lost 90, over 100 tanks. Over 100 tanks. And like another 50 armored vehicles. Like, how do you fuck up that bad? I think that was a fortified position too. Um, I think they were attacking a like fortified position or something like that. Yeah, I think the Libyans had like dug in massively, but they were just that retarded. Like they weren't able to do anything. Um, okay, so that was one of the turning points. Then we have the Battle of Bir Kora, which was the next one in the war, where it was an unknown number of. It was just so few they don't even know. The Libyans lost 90 tanks versus several trucks. Like, how could you suck that bad? And I get it that it's kind of hard to deal with fast moving trucks, and it's not so much the Chads, like they had modern anti-tank equipment, but still, like, you'd think even if the tanks fired back, they would have done better than this. um yeah, so what happened during this battle, which was kind of interesting, um is so the Libyans were under attack and they sent a relief force. The relief force was like 3 days too late, but they decided not to call off the relief force. So the Chadians overran the Libyan relief force as well. Let's see here. Battle of Azu. I think this was another disaster. So they lost this one as well. It doesn't say what the Chad casualties were. Pyrrhic Libyan victory. Imagine getting a Pyrrhic Libyan victory where it's 400 versus 15,000, and you suck that hard that you still lose. Okay, Toyota trucks. So they put anti-tank missiles on Toyota pickup trucks and raced 2 of the trucks towards the tank from opposite directions. The tanks weren't able to move their turrets fast enough to track them. Um, so yeah, the Chads were just very dynamic, fast moving forces. They basically just fought like how they traditionally had, but with other stuff. Let's see, another Chad victory. Oh, this one's another. Is this the last one? Oh yeah, this is when Chad invaded Libya. Um, Chad invaded Libya because they suck that much to destroy their various supply dumps. So once again, this is like the Libyans lost pretty much their entire army. Um, the remainder of their tanks and aircraft. Let me see if there's like a total losses for the war. Okay, yeah, the Libyans lost 800 tanks over the course of the war, um, and a lot of their air force, and it was just a fucking disaster. I mean, you lose to the GUNT and you lose to the FAP. Like, is there anything more pathetic than losing to an organization called FAP or losing to the GUNT? Like, it's a meme war. Like, you got the Chads being Chad, you got the GUNT being slow and inept. You have Gaddafi just completely screwing the pooch on it. It's just amazing. Let's see here. Yeah, they blew up the main Libyan airbase in southern Libya. Uh, let's see here. Um, a general offensive into Libya proper. Can you imagine if Chad had have overwhelmed Libya and put the GUNT in power, and then Libya would have been run by the GUNT? Like, it's just, it's just so shitty. Like, I can't even believe it, to be honest. Yeah, the Chads also used armored vehicles, armored cars, which are pretty useful. I think they have enough armor to block small arms fire. Let me see. Kind of. What is their armor? Um, it doesn't say what they're capable of. I'm just wondering if they can stop like 50 BMG. I don't know. Anyways, so that's the Toyota War. That's GUNT versus Chad with Gaddafi thrown in and FAP thrown in as well. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. Libya lost to Chad. They couldn't even hold this fucking tiny strip in the middle of nowhere. So, I hope people enjoyed this show. Um, I might do another video on this, but I thought that just covered most of the stuff that I wanted to cover. So,